Less than a minute. Okay, here we go.
I see.
And continue to jump in as we get going. The meeting's not locked or anything, so they'll get here when they get here. But until they do, thank you everyone for coming and from your respective homes. This is our third installment of our talk series, so it's really exciting that it keeps growing. So thank you for showing up continually to the people who have showed up to all of them. And thank you for joining us for the first time. To those of you that this is your first time, we're really excited to see all of your faces via webcam. Today we're talking with Katie Beck, who is the Executive Director of North Akron Community Development Corporation and the Artistic Director of Gundip Theater, and Jim Slowiak, who is the Co-Artistic Director of the New World Performance Lab and the Professor of Theater, the Theater Coordinator, and the Arts Administration Interim Coordinator at the University of Akron. Before we jump into their introductions and everything that they'll take us into, if everyone could mute themselves once they start talking, just to minimize background noise. And then also this will be recorded. So if you want to go back and listen to anything, or if you missed something or jumped in late, you can find this recording within the next 24, 48 hours on the University of Akron website. What was my last thing? Yeah. Oh, if you have questions, we'll have time for questions at the end that people can speak them, but so that you don't lose them, go ahead and drop them in the group chat. And then we will get to those as we go and just kind of shout out, and they will answer as they come in. So with that, whoever wants to go first, it's all you.
Why don't you go ahead, Katie?
Okay, I'm just doing a basic introduction. Okay. Great. So yes, my name is Katie Beck. As Amy mentioned, I wear a couple of different hats. One is as a community-based theater maker throughout Akron, but really in the last year or so focusing on North Hill. And then I'm also executive director of North Akron CDC, which is a community development corporation, which, if I don't know how familiar you are with that type of work, but it's really an intersection of everything, social, cultural, economic, all sort of bringing the pieces together to, create a network of folks within a certain area to make sure that people are living and thriving where they live, work, and play. So I'm very privileged and honored to be someone that works, lives, and plays in North Hill, and probably one of the biggest advocates of the neighborhood. So that's just a little bit about me.
I'm Jim Slowiak. I'm a professor of theater at the University of Akron and the coordinator of the theater program and interim coordinator of arts administration, the graduate program in arts administration that we house in the School of Dance, Theater, and Arts Administration. I'm also co-artistic director of a small theater company called New World Performance Lab, which has been active in Northeast Ohio for almost 30 years. And we are in residence at the Balch Street Community Center and have been for the last 7 years, I believe. And we produce alternative experimental work there. We also have an international reputation and have toured quite a bit around the world and do workshops and also serve. We have an umbrella organization called the Center for Applied Theater, which serves as a fiscal agent for several other groups, including Q Theater Ensemble, which is an LGBTQ youth theater, and Masu Productions, which is an emerging African-American theater company here in town. And we've also nurtured other arts organizations such as CADA, the Center for Applied Drama and Autism, and several others. So yeah, I guess that kind of keeps me busy, all of that. So yeah,
So we'll jump right in. We'll keep this Katie, then Jim set up just to keep things consistent, and then feel free to have a back and forth between the two of you as we go too. So how has the quarantine affected your organizations as a whole?
Sure. So for GumDip specifically, at the end of 2019, we received a Night Arts Challenge grant of $25,000 to produce a multilingual play called Three Countries, One Mother, which is based on the history and culture of Bhutanese Nepali Americans. So with that project, it's supposed to sort of span over 2 years in terms of development and engagement before the full production happens. So the timing for us was kind of okay in terms of, timing for a global pandemic, like what it could be, because we had already sort of planned that our first 6 months of 2020 would be focused on grant writing, raising funds, doing research, a lot more of the administrative duties that sort of come around one of these grants. Because if you don't know, with Night Arts Challenge grants, you have to raise matching funds. So we have to raise a matching $25,000 in order for the project to happen. So the timing of that sort of worked out in the first few months because we really just have been focusing on the fundraising. However, we had hoped that this summer we would start doing in-person story circles. So a big part of GumDip's process is facilitating story circles with anywhere between 7 to 25 people at a time, and just collecting stories and experiences from specific communities to then use later as content for our plays. So the plan was to facilitate 6 story circles starting in May, trying to do one a month in collaboration with other Bhutanese Nepali American cultural organizations, so that we could start or continue, I should say, continue developing the script for this play. That's obviously not going to happen how we thought it would. So starting at the end of next week, we are going to do a virtual story circle. So what that means is we're going to invite folks from the Bhutanese Nepali American communities, or even communities that are related within their experience, to record themselves telling a story through video and audio files, and submit that to us over the next couple of months. And just using that as a tool to continue our engagement that we want with this project, and also, honoring and centering the community members as we're developing the script. So we have started creating the script already from other personal stories with Nima. And so it's going to look a little bit different than what we thought in terms of this engagement piece. But, the first month was sort of that shock and devastation of everything. And now it's time to sort of pivot and move forward with a different way of doing it. The next step of that plan after the story circles was to have a stage reading at the end of the year. And I'm not sure even if that'll be able to happen the way that we thought. So I've just been really aware and trying to observe how other live performance and artists are using Zoom and WebEx and things like that to produce, and to continue working with the projects that they're working on. So I think we're just going to keep adjusting, and then our plan was that the production would happen in summer of 2022. So I'm hopeful that by then we will be able to have the full live production that we want. And then these 2 years will just sort of adjust and, pivot as necessary.
I think for the purposes of this, I think I'm going to wear my New World Performance Lab hat more than my University of Akron hat as I'm talking and trying to put some thoughts together here. Yeah, I think we've been dealing with the pandemic as an organization. But I don't think we can really separate it from the way I've been dealing with the pandemic, and my partner Jairo has been dealing with the pandemic since we've been in quarantine together. So I think it's interesting to me how it's a very personal moment in time. a very a time of reflection, a time of pause and stop in many ways, and time to maybe rethink some things. So I kind of see it as a big improvisation that we are going through, that nature and has sort of handed us this this position of, okay, you're in a pandemic now. What do you do? And we all have to begin to improvise, and we have to find a whole lot of new ways of behaving. So I think personally, it's been a time of a lot of reflection, a lot of thinking about what maybe we had been doing, and and how coming out of this period of pause and stop. Um, I think my my friend Chris used a word some years ago for a situation, a lull. We're kind of in this lull period, I guess. So we're in the coming out of this lull. How are we going to be better for it? Is I guess the big question. And because I'm asking that question personally, then of course that becomes the question for the organization as well. So New World Performance Lab was in the midst of rehearsing and gathering material for a new performance that we were devising called Passions Play. And it was based, or it is based on the work of Maurice Maeterlinck, and a great symbolist, dramatist of the early part of the 20th century. And we were just at the point where we were going to invite the design team in to kind of see what we had. We had sort of just gathered all the material together and created a kind of script. And we were just at that moment when rehearsals were stopped. Our space, the Bulk Street Theater, is being used by the city of Akron as a quarantine center for first responders and health workers who don't have, who maybe are exposed to the virus and don't want to quarantine themselves at home, but they need a place to quarantine themselves. So the city asked us if we would allow the theater to be used in that way, and we said no problem. And so the theater right now has cots in it and is being used, or is ready for that. As far as I know, as of yesterday, no one had taken up residence there to be quarantined, but the space is there, which means that we also don't have access to the space at all we haven't had any access to the space at all during this period. So we're at this point with Passions Play, and we've been having some company meetings via Zoom or WebEx to maintain connection with each other and to maintain connection with the material. We've all been very surprised how the material that we put together in some way foreshadowed what was happening. That we sort of were already talking about the plague and being in quarantine and things like that before any of this kind of came down the pipe. So we felt like as we went back and read the material last week, the actors were saying no one's going to believe that we wrote this actually before the quarantine, because there are so many elements in it that are very much of the time, and that's true. So right now we are, like I said, we are on hold. We're waiting to see, first of all, when we can have access again to our space. and to our office and everything. And we are waiting to make contact again with each other, because that is so much what our work is about. We've been a little reluctant to sort of jump on the social media bandwagon of like, okay, well, we gotta maintain this kind of connection with our audience, and we've gotta, we should be putting stuff out there every day, and we all should be doing things, and we all, let's put up old performances, and let's do this and let's do that, and that. I mean, and I can speak personally. I've been reluctant to do that, so I guess therefore the company is reluctant to do it. And I think because I'm not sure that's the response. Like I said, I think there's something more for me about this period that is about step back and taking and breathing and reflecting and really kind of setting priorities, and not just doing. And I can say that we have the luxury to be able to do that, which is good, because I know a lot of groups don't have that luxury, and they do have to respond in a different way. So I think we each have to respond in our own way, and which brings me to the other point, of course, and that is the economic question that all of this brings up. And I think that question right now is becoming more and more frightening as the quarantine continues, and as we look forward into the summer and the fall, and events continue to get canceled, and there doesn't seem to be any real when we will be able to have some kind of community meetings again, in person, in contact, and that becomes more and more scary, I guess. And then the financial problems this is creating for artists everywhere, and especially for gig artists. Well, not even only gig artists, because so many other artists have been furloughed or let go from their jobs, or whatever. New World Performance Lab, we had just this year hired a part-time administrator, and we also had our actors on stipend from January through June for the work on Passion's play. It wasn't huge stipends, but it was, there was more than we've ever been able to pay people before. And we decided to continue to pay those stipends, despite the fact that, because we have the money through the end of our fiscal year. So even though our earned income took a big beating without having ticket sales or anything without having ticket sales or any other kind of earned income, we are able to continue our commitment to pay those stipends through the end of June. And then we're going to just wait and see what happens in terms of next year. So that's kind of where the company is at right now, and where I'm at.
So Jim, you touched on this a little bit, but I'm gonna run back to Katie since you touched on it. Katie, you mentioned that you live in North Hill, you work, live, play there. How has this, let me rephrase, how have you managed to continue to work, live, play, and still cherish the place that you live while in quarantine?
That's a really good question. I think when this all first happened, I was like a little bit excited because I was in such a, Jim sort of mentioned, always being busy. Like I was always being busy running here and there. And I identify more as an introvert. Like I just need space to myself to feel good. So at first I was like kind of excited, like, all right, some space to work on some business planning and grant writing and that kind of thing. But then after like, week 3 or 4, I really started to feel the effects of being separated from people. I spent a lot of my time in the Exchange House, which is a public space that NACDC owns and operates. And that space is just completely unpredictable. There's people in and out, but it's a really great hub for the neighborhood because it is, we're located there central physically, but then we're also known to be, connecting resources, building relationships. So even though at first I was almost grateful for that pause or that space, now I'm like really missing that energy and that life, because that's the last 3 years that's been my, sort of my grounding is in that space. So like I said, I'm still fortunate because I live in the neighborhood, so I'm able to go out and walk. Even in those walks, I've run into people that I know from the neighborhood, so that's kind of fun while wearing masks. But we've really, or I have personally tried to do more reaching out through social media as much as possible. And we've, from our own organizational standpoint, like I said, we've been pivoting again. So we've been creating videos in multiple languages to help spread information. We're reallocating some of our grant funds that were supposed to be for in-person sort of programs. Now we're reallocating it for some operating funds, and then also to support these multilingual video sort of outreach. And there's a few other ideas that we're playing around with that I can't really share in this moment because they're not for sure, but there are some opportunities as well that we're hoping to support some local entrepreneurs in the new normal, if you will. So yeah, I guess I go through waves. Like today I'm very positive and happy and productive, but a lot of days I'm sad and missing, being around people. And I think that probably speaks to a lot of theater artists because our work is, human to human contact. And so not having the space to do that, even if you're trying, I just don't feel like digital is the same. Like I've done a lot of different Zoom meetings and, FaceTime, and it's just not the same as being in the same room with people. So, I've been trying to adjust as much as possible, but I definitely feel like I'm missing people and missing the space and of rehearsal and just creativity and trying to experiment with things and building relationships that way. And I also, and then also from an economic standpoint, like I'm fortunate because I do have a paycheck from my day job that's continued. So I've been trying to, like intentionally buy food from places that are still open, or, donate if someone has a Kickstarter campaign, just trying to do it that way. Because that's all I can do right now.
I agree with everything you said. That resonated with me, speaking of resonating with theater people. So thank you for saying all that. So this is for both of you, whoever wants to go. How has this changed your understanding of what theater is, since it can't be the in-person contact to contact way that we know theater to be?
Yeah, well, I think Katie touched that with what she was saying in terms of, that this format, this platform just is not the same as either being in a rehearsal room with actors or in a performance situation with audience and performers. And I mean, there's just no way to replicate that. And I think there are a lot of things that can happen on this kind of platform. It is close to, it's as alive, I guess, as we're going to get on the internet. It's more alive than television or most of the television we see or film. So I mean, what's happening is I know that you're all there, and that you are in the same time continuum as I am, I guess, and that, you know, things are happening and we are reacting to each other with a little bit of a delay sometimes, but at least we're able to, you know, I can say something and you can smile or you can agree or disagree with me or whatever. So we do have that ability with this platform, but I think the limitations of it right now, for me anyway, far outweigh the possibilities. And you know, I guess I think on one hand we can't wait to you know, for things to open up again, or for the audiences to come back to the theater, or you know, for those communal activities to become what they were before. We can't just sit back and wait. On the other hand, I think I'm also not ready to concede that is forever going to be changed because of this, or that, well, it will forever be changed because of this, but that we won't ever be able to go back to that kind of communal uh, that is what makes live theater live theater. Um, the kind of meeting that can occur when two people are making contact with each other. So, but you know, here we are, and so we're exploring, you know, what can happen, and I think what becomes most exciting, the other day in my directing class, a student presented a project, and and at one point someone was late for class, so that while we were all watching the project, this live voice entered in on the project saying, let me in, let me in. You know? And in that moment I went, ah, that's theater. That moment of like this like random person like wanting to be let in, while we were all engaged with some kind of internet web thing. uh, it suddenly for me was, my heart beat faster, and I was engaged in a different way. So that showed me that, okay, yeah, things, how can we make that happen over a period of time, and not just be a random interruption into something, but that kind of aliveness that occurred in that moment. How can we expand those moments on this platform and make it more alive, what's happening?
Yeah, I totally agree with everything you just said, Jim. And just to add that I think I'm really hopeful for the future of theater because, long before everything happened with coronavirus, I've been saying that I feel like people are out of the practice of going to theater. Like they have Netflix, Hulu, all the apps to stay home and be entertained. But now everyone's getting that full time, right? Like they're not able to go out and interact with people. So my hope is that they'll be thirsty, like they'll be really wanting to go out and have like human to human interaction. And that's, where theater and live performance, like that's where we belong. And so I'm hopeful that there'll be sort of a big explosion of events and live performances. And when we are all able to gather in person again, there will be a lot more people showing up because they've been isolated with technology, with their families or pets or whatever, and will want to feel, human emotion again. So I think that's where we come in with all of this.
Yes, I agree. And what I hope is that we all as theater artists, we use this time to really invigorate the art and the craft of what we're doing, so that people do understand and can feel that it is something more exciting and more alive than sitting at home and watching Netflix. Yeah.
You guys both just answered the next question, but it led me to another one, so it's fine. So you said that this will, when we come out of this, that the community will be hungry for that human interaction. So in the meantime, what are some tangible ways that we as artists and we as theater people can make sure that that hunger is realized and identified correctly, and then fill it when we're allowed to be humans again?
I think that's a good question. I think that's something I've been sort of asking myself a lot is, you know, even in isolation or having interactions with very few people, what types of things can I be doing to continue, you know, stretching my creative muscles or continuing to work on, you know, this longer term project. So, you know, some things are just I'm reading a lot more, you know, that not I mean I read before, but it was always like online articles, but now like reading from physical books, which it's been since I've been in college, which I know is like that's kind of a shameful thing, but it's good, right? It's like reading and researching, watching live performances that are available online. Like the National Theater has been releasing a play every week, and they are just awesome, really high quality stuff, and just continuing to practice, you know, in our own ways, because yeah, Jim is right. Like we have to be ready to reinvigorate the form. And if anything, theater artists are good at observing what's around them and also observing themselves in action. So how are we feeling? What are we thinking about? How do certain events in the news make us feel? And then somehow turning that into something, whether that's, you know, journal entries or a solo performance or whatever it is, just always being observant and aware and trying to, you know, reflect through our art. Whether that, you know, becomes professionally produced or not, I think it's still important to be practicing something while we're in isolation. Because, you know, if we don't, then that could be, you know, either sort of a traumatic experience of absorbing all this and not doing something with it, or it could just mentally be not healthy. So that's what I would say is just, you know, continuing to practice free writing, you know, going through movement sequences, whatever it is that you have, just using it and doing it as much as you can.
Yes, I agree. I was I think I was telling the company this, but we need to look at this as a kind of chance for each of us to sort of take a trip. We're all in some way on a trip, and because of this technology, we can travel around the world right now, virtually. So, like Katie mentioned, you know, watching the National Theater productions has been, you know, like, wow, it's great. And the Siegel Center in New York has been doing these every day at 12 o'clock, has been doing panel sessions like this, but with theater artists from all over the world, and really well respected and interesting people. And you know, and there are other smaller groups that are, you know, streaming things or whatever. Meredith Monk, who's one of my great idols and has, you know, done more interesting voice work than almost any other performer in the world, is her company is giving you know, voice workshops for the next 4 Sundays at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you know, virtually. You know, so there are things like that. We have this possibility right now because we're not in rehearsal, where we can actually take advantage of some self education and replenish some of our stores and resources, and get uh, stimulated again by reading or by seeing things, watching things, taking the time to experience virtually or in reality, going out and walking in the woods or whatever it is that we need to do, and taking the time to allow that to sort of refill us as human beings, which will only provide material for us when we understand what that creative path is going to be in the future and how we're going to be able to use it. So I guess, coming back to what I was saying at first, I guess, for us and for me personally, rushing into something is not the way I want to deal with this creatively. To make some real, to just kind of do the obvious. And so our approach, I think, is going to be a little bit slower and like, okay, let's take a moment to breathe. Let's take a moment to see what's around us and see how we can fill the void or react. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, you mentioned self-education in this time. I'm just curious. I'm not sure if this will be additive for anyone else, but so speaking of self-education, how will this real life quarantine, or will this real life quarantine affect the script for this show? Or how do you think it's going to affect the interpretation of it for the actors, for the audience, any way? Yeah.
I mean, I think it's going to affect it a lot. Like I said, it was already part of it, and I think it's going to. I think when we all get back in rehearsal, I think things will change quite a bit, and the actors are already talking about that and how, and how their personal response to the material will be very different because of what's happening.
Well, we have a little bit of time left. If anyone has any questions, you can unmute yourself and shout it out. I'll give it a couple seconds, and if nobody has anything, I'll keep going. All right. Well, that's all the questions I had. Thank you so much to you both for speaking with us and giving us your input. Yeah. Chris has a question. Yay.
Okay. I actually wanted to ask several questions about what is going to happen after, but I'm not going to ask all of them. Initially, I was thinking about, do you have like a specific plan? Are we gonna go slow, or we just jump into it? However, I'm not sure you can answer this kind of question, because it'll probably depend on what kind of a going back to normal pace the government is going to allow us. I mean, they may allow us to go back to work, but still not have audiences, right? Things of that sort for quite a foreseeable time. So my question is going to be a little bit lighter then. You personally, what do you think you'll do first after it all? And it's going to be Weight Watchers, Alcoholic Anonymous, the barber shop, or the shrink?
You want to take that one first, Katie?
So you're asking us personally, like the first place or like thing we'll do? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I'm asking, after the governor says, okay, go back and you can go out and you don't have to quarantine yourself anymore. Where will you go first? to the Weight Watchers office, to the Alcoholic Anonymous, to the barber shop, or to the shrink?
I think my first place will be the nail salon. Um, honestly, because I usually get my nails done, and I know it's such a first world problem, but like I've been having to paint them every like 2 days, and that's just not what I want. Hopefully I won't have to go to Alcoholics Anonymous. But I think my first big kind of like event I would want to do is just throw a big community party at the Exchange House. That would be like, I just want to invite everyone and just do karaoke and have a bonfire and just be with community again.
Yeah, I think for me, it'll be massage or the chiropractor, something like that. That's the first place I will go. And I think, and then the barber shop, those practical things, you know? I don't think I need a shrink or those other social self-help groups or whatever, but I think it's more the practical kind of human contact things that I'm missing, I think, more than anything right now. About your question though about the future, Chris, I think it's you know, I mean, I think you kind of gave my answer to that, and that I think we have to wait. We're in this period of waiting, and that was why I thought of it as an improvisation, because until we know what the structure of the improvisation is, we can't really begin to improvise. And right now, we don't really have the structure yet, what it's going to be. So, what the parameters are. So it's hard to say, we're going to immediately go into rehearsal and open the show on such and such a date. Really hard to say that. And that's, I mean, I think it's a problem we're having right now with the university in terms of planning the performance season for the university. Because the university is not being very forthcoming yet in terms of what their plans are for the fall. Until that's clear, and until the governor's plans are clear, it's real hard to know if we can, you know, can we have a performance as long as as long as the audience stays 6 feet apart? Can we have rehearsals with actors as long as everyone is, you know, no one is making physical contact, or you know, we're not endangering the actors in that way. I mean, and if that's the case, do we want to have rehearsals under those circumstances where the actors have to stay 6 feet away from each other? You know, I think all questions are.
Well, maybe it's time to do some mask theater again.
And that's a possibility too. Yeah. Except when you're covering the mouth and the nose, then I mean, we might end up all going back to pantomime. How's your pantomime, Josie? You should be working on your pantomime.
Sure. We'll take up miming.
Okay. Good.
I think just to go off that too, you know, in this time of pause and reflection, it's also bringing to light a lot of systemic oppression. I know, I'm sure a lot of people in this WebEx are aware of that, but for a lot of other people who may not have as much consciousness or education around it, it's really revealing how our capitalist system is not supportive of the majority of people. And so I'm interested to see not only with theater and arts, but like, you know, what role can artists fill in reimagining our economic system and reimagining our political system, because it's obviously not working for most of us. And so I think it's almost exciting, but in a scary way, that people are finally seeing that in real life. And unfortunately, people are suffering and dying because of this coronavirus, but it's also a wake-up call. And so for me, that's really exciting to sort of build on that momentum and that energy, so that hopefully, you know, come November and past November, we can start rebuilding from the destruction that has been done, especially in the last 4 years.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Katie, because I think that's, for me, a real key element. And you articulated that really beautifully. I think in terms of one of our responsibilities right now, when we do go back, I think that's going to be key. How we all approach that, and I think that's what I was kind of alluding to when I said that we don't go back to the same old, you know, but that we have to make sure that we don't just back on that treadmill, and that we know we have some different objectives in terms of what we're doing. Yeah, and for me that has to do with the social political situation and the just vast oppression that we've been witnessing over the last years. I think you know, the other thing that's been concerning me of late is what we, you know, just short term, what we have coming up in terms of the food supply, and you know, I mean, things, all of that kind of thing that is really frightening. So last night in the middle of the night, I couldn't sleep, and I watched an old movie on TCM about a viral epidemic that, you know, where everyone just became, it just turned into anarchy, and this was a virus that attacked grass. So any kind of grass, so all the wheat, all the rice, everything in the world, there was no more grass food stuff in the world, and everyone just went crazy. So it was a funny old movie, but I like those kind of movies.
What movie was this?
I think it had like the grass, something about grass was in the title. It was on TCM like at 3 o'clock in the morning, and it was directed by Cornell Wilde, who is a fairly well-known Hollywood actor from back in the 50s and 60s. So it was interesting.
It has been, grass viruses aside, that has been a common theme in all of these talks, is that everyone who's come on has said, we don't want to go back to the same thing. We want to rebound instead of just, like you said, jumping back on the treadmill. So I think that's a really good united front, that everyone, regardless of their craft or their place of residence, I don't know, everyone has said that so far. So I find that to be very encouraging and very, yeah.
And I think that's going to come from those of us on the in the lower echelons of the artistic community. I mean, I'm not sure that's going to come from people like at the Cleveland Orchestra or the Symphony. I mean, I think they're just going to try to maintain what they've got. I think those of us who are from the smaller arts organizations are the ones who are going to have the possibility, and in some way need to remind each other about that too, as we continue, because it's easy to forget. So you know, to remind ourselves and each other that, hey, you know, let's not go back to the way it was. Let's redefine things and find new ways. And I think for those of you who are arts administrators or interested in being arts administrators, I think you're going to be really important in terms terms of that new future as well, and kind of how is it going to, what's it going to look like? What can it look like? Dreaming it a little bit, taking the time during this pause to sort of dream it a little bit, and then, you know, we can make it happen.
Well, if anyone has any other questions, now is the time to raise a hand, speak up. We're about coming up on our time. But thank you again to Jim and Katie for talking with us. This was one of the more fun conversations that we've had so far. So this was very fun for me. Yeah. And,
thank you.
This whole conversation was recorded. So if you do want to go back and look over anything, or if you jumped in late, it will be on the University of Akron Arts Administration website in the next 48-ish hours, maybe. So you can go back and listen to it there. The next talk should be sometime next week, and as those dates and times get pinned down, you guys are on the list, so you'll all find out about them. And thank you again, everyone, for joining us and shooting some questions out there. And yeah, stay healthy, stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Remember to turn this thing off.
That's what I'm trying to do.